Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Bob Rose. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager for Infoblox, DDI, Value Added Services. And today we're going to be talking to you about IPAM QuickStart for visibility, automation, and control. And with me today is our Senior Director of Product Management, Dave Signori. Welcome, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. And just to let you know, my ownership there at Senior Director at Infoblox is for DDI as well, Value Added Services, Network Insight, NetMRI, and Hybrid Cloud. That's my responsibility here.
All right. Well, before we get started, Dave, I'd just like to mention a few housekeeping items for those on the call. We are recording today's event and we'll publish it in the Infoblox experts community and on the YouTube channel. And we will also be sending out a link so that you can view this again, or perhaps send it on to a colleague that was not able to make the call today. In addition to that, if you have any questions, you can enter them through the Q&A chat window in the Zoom console. We'll also try to answer them in real time. We also have a few items that we're going to share out with you after the call today. That includes the Tolly report that looks at TCO of using Infoblox Authoritative IPAM for DNS and DHCP, and also the IPAM integration with Microsoft Active Directory sites and local services. That's a white paper in appreciation for your attendance today. So today we're actually going to show you the Infoblox entry IPAM solution. And so why don't we go ahead and get started. We'll take a look at today's agenda. So we will be sharing with you the key IT networking priorities and challenges. We'll be doing an overview of the solution and then sharing some of the advantages and case studies, and then we'll do a wrap up with a few Q&A questions as they come in. So, what are some of the specific objectives for IP address management in the data center network? And at Infoblox, we looked to our customers and received some commonalities, and we wanted to categorize those into different areas, and we found these four buckets really. Dave, what we're seeing is visibility, efficiency, manageability, and security. So if we were to just drill down into each of those for a moment, what about visibility, Dave? When we talk to our customers, what kinds of things are we finding that are their key priorities?
Yeah, priorities are simply knowing what's out there. I talk to a lot of prospects, existing customers that are just having a challenge knowing their network infrastructure, the end host, the users, what their Microsoft DNS DHCP environment looks like, and getting that all to a single view. Simply knowing what is out there, and knowing what's there is the first step to security as well, because you can't secure what you don't know about. So a lot of times it's not even network ops that is telling me this, it's security, and in some cases it's the Microsoft server team, because they want to be able to have a common place to view their infrastructure.
Yeah, visibility is so key, but it's also managing what you have, right? So in the area of efficiency, what kinds of feedback have you gotten from customers?
Well, it's more efficient when you get everything into a single view, and the more systems that you can get into a single view makes you more efficient as well. So in this particular situation, when you've got a Microsoft connection, if you can provide visibility to Active Directory, to sites, services, to the network, subnets used for replication, that sort of thing, you can see the actual users, and it's scaling across not just multiple subnets, but different network sites, different regions, then it's going to be you're going to gain operational efficiency in that regard.
Well, and another key issue is manageability, right? Because still a lot of customers we engage with use spreadsheets or work-built tools. What kind of feedback do you get in the area of manageability?
Yeah, so it's not just the view. Once you gain visibility into the entire infrastructure, being able to actually manage it from a single console obviously has a lot of efficiencies in it as well. And in addition to that, if you can provide hooks to automate across other systems, if you need to automate, for instance, getting the next, IP address that's available for a workflow automation or workload automation workflow, then that's going to be a key. So it's not just visibility. Once you see everything, like, all right, now wouldn't it be great to be able to manage it from this one location also?
Yeah, and then of course, security. I mean, you can't look through the media without hearing some type of distributed denial of service attack or some major organization dealing with security breach. What types of things in that area do you hear about?
Well, as I mentioned a second ago, visibility is the first step to security. But then once you get all that information in there, and you know when things come and go on the network, those become good hooks out to nice security use cases to automate a vulnerability scan of a subnet that just came up or an IP address that just came up, that sort of thing. But also, as this slide mentions, DNS is becoming a common attack vector, and so if you can detect those sorts of things with a feed that has a list of blacklisted sites, every lookup that your users make has to make a DNS call. So if they download malware, if they click on a phishing link, that has to go and make a DNS lookup, and we can be there to stop that. So that's yeah. So security is obviously important. Seeing a lot of security initiatives around the interest in the products.
Well, so visibility, efficiency, manageability, security, these are really what companies are after today. But there are challenges, right, Dave? I mean, we've touched on some of those. We did some research among customers and folks in the marketplace, and we learned that in terms of visibility, 81% of those that were surveyed want discovery and control of newly spun up assets. Dave, what are some of the thoughts that you have there in terms of those challenges to visibility?
Yeah, this just confirms the priorities on the last page in that we pulled this up in reports, but we hear this from customers also, and a lot of it is the coming and going. It's not just what's out there, but things change a lot. So a common request is, hey, I just need to know what infrastructure popped up over the weekend. I need to know new VLANs. I need to know if I think something's out there, but it's not there anymore. I just need to have that clear visibility of not just of what's there, but what is changing over time.
Another stunning statistic is from the research, 8 out of 10 customers that were surveyed actually manage DNS manually or with custom scripts. I mean, does that surprise you? It seems like that happens more often than not.
It's a little surprising, and obviously a DNS or an IPAM system would help with that, not just in the UI and tracking networks and containers and IP addresses and trying to figure out what's the next one that's available, but more importantly, and we'll talk about it more, is making sure that IPAM system is accurate. So we have automations, we have discovery built in so that when you think that an IP address is in use, it really is in use, and that's obviously gonna make things more efficient to you if you manually do not have to make the update, but it is done automatically.
Yeah, and then another challenge that a lot of companies face is disparate platforms. The research showed that nearly 80% use 3 or more platforms. And when you consider NetOps and the cloud teams and teams that are managing DHCP and DNS, et cetera, right, you can really end up in a challenging environment.
Oh yeah, I hear this one probably the most. I hear it all the time. Give me a UI that's showing me what's on the network, the end hosts, the network infrastructure, and also make it a common view, the things that you're learning from the existing DNS DHCP environment, regardless of whether it's an Infoblox one or not, information that's coming from my software-defined network, my SD-WAN network, which can sometimes create a hole in your discovery protocol because those are using, may not be using SNMP, maybe using API instead to gather that data. Visibility across cloud. Talked to a lot of IPAM admins, just like all this activity is going on in my Azure environment, and I'm not aware of it. So to be able to collapse that helps, and having those disparate platforms has been challenging.
Yeah, and then of course, you just mentioned a moment ago how DNS is the most common application layer attack for security. This is one of those things, right, that's just not going to go away, the security challenges.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. You can, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can attack DNS. You can do a replication amplification attack. You can simply use tunneling through the DNS port 53 because that's typically open in the firewalls. But the other thing about DNS that's nice is you can use it for a control point. So as I mentioned earlier, malware's on a user's PC. That malware has to go and make a connection to command and control, and that is an opportunity to catch that because there has to be a DNS lookup that occurs. So again, I know that we're not focusing on using necessarily DNS DHCP from Infoblox in this case. Even if you're not, you're going to see there's a ton of visibility and reporting we make available to you on, for instance, most common domains being hit, most active users doing DNS lookups, DHCP lease history, that sort of thing. So we can help you out with that too.
You know, Dave, you just mentioned something that's really interesting about tunneling just a moment ago, because there are some legitimate apps that are out there that actually use tunneling. And so then the challenge becomes, how do you discern between the good ones and those that are actually trying to infiltrate or exfiltrate your network?
Right. Yeah.
So it's a big challenge there. So let's take a look now at some of the challenges that specifically Microsoft IPAM presents. One of the key areas is it's difficult, frankly, to architect, deploy, and maintain. IPAM can't coexist on the same operating system with DHCP without having SQL Server. And SQL Server, of course, requires SQL cluster. And so by the time you actually put all of this together, you've got IPAM, you've got DNS, DHCP, SQL Server, Active Directory. That's 5 different servers. And by the time you have to keep doing reboots to keep it, get it working and keep it working, you're disrupting deployment of services on a fairly regular basis. And so that's one significant challenge that folks just running Microsoft out of the box have to face. Another thing, Dave, you touched on it a moment ago, is incomplete discovery. So Microsoft certainly can identify Active Directory related endpoints, but it doesn't find everything on the network. So if you have a non-Windows based IP address, it's really challenging, and especially if you have a manually added component, it's tough to get that as part of the full picture. So that incomplete discovery is a key issue. A replication is another challenge because changes that are made in one GUI may not be detected in the other, and by the time you do Active Directory replication, it could take up to 15 minutes, especially if you have an environment that really has a poor configuration. So that's really a challenge as well. And then ultimately, Microsoft's Next IP doesn't do boundaries well. So network and IP addresses could actually be sent through DHCP, and that could bring down the network, including addresses that are outside the range. The bottom line is that Microsoft is really focused right now on investing in cloud, not IPAM, and this is really one of Infoblox's key sweet spots because we can provide the visibility, the reliability, and the automation that you need that really layers on top of your existing Microsoft infrastructure so that you don't have to make wholesale changes. It just layers on right over the top. So those are some key thoughts to keep in mind as you consider an IPAM solution. Well, Dave, let's look quickly at Microsoft Surround and IPAM QuickStart. Can you just quickly highlight for us, what is this all about?
Yeah, so what is it? What are we presenting to you today? So what this is several different features from Infoblox. It's IP address management primarily. But this is an overlay to your existing Microsoft DHCP DNS environment. So that's key. Yeah, we're saying you keep that. You can keep using Microsoft Active Directory, of course, DNS, DHCP, and we're just going to overlay IP address management and discover that environment and give you a central platform. It also includes our discovery. So this is infrastructure discovery, going out and discovering your routers, your switches, your firewalls, all of your end hosts, whether they're client servers, infrastructure, of course, whether it's coming out of an SDN environment, that sort of thing. It has reporting and analytics, which is built on a Splunk engine, right? So it's very powerful, ton of out-of-the-box reports that you can customize. And, we're sitting on a ton of valuable data, the status of all the networks, the IP addresses, the infrastructure, cloud, all the Microsoft DHCP DNS environment, and all that's available for real-time trend reporting, even predictive analytics. It includes our discovery module that goes and discovers from public cloud. So Azure, Amazon, Google Cloud Platform. Obviously, we're discovering from VMware OpenStack internally as well. So you get that visibility, including some nice plug-in automations that have automated workflow built out for orchestrators like Ansible or VMware VRA. And then we have an ecosystem, which simply means that it's our outbound API. We have a ton of out-of-the-box integrations with that just, that just you can pull down from our community site. And that helps when we have a trigger, when something is discovered, to call out to a third-party vendor like a Qualys or a Tenable or a Rapid7 to do a scan. So it's basically those features, right? We're not focusing on Infoblox, DNS, DHCP. We're focusing on our IP address management system and all of the components that allow you to gobble up and discover your environment and allow you to manage it and allow you to report on it.
Yeah, and so you've touched on it a little bit, but can you just recap again how it works?
Yeah, so it's very deep discovery. Meaning there's a ton of different ways that we interact with the network infrastructure. We populate our IP address management system so that when you put a subnet in IPAM, you put an IP address in IPAM, we're validating that it's really on the network, right? And you can even write policy on how to release something or to say, hey, we found something you didn't know about. And then also to overlay a particular IP address, if there is a DNS resource record for it, is that there's currently a DHCP lease out on it, and if it is a router or an endpoint to what it's attached to. And so we're staying synchronized with our IPAM system. There's a bit of automation built into this tool. You can actually define networks on routers. You can define provision switch ports with VLAN, description, admin up, down, that sort of thing. A lot of reporting built in, as I mentioned. And as I mentioned a second ago, the ecosystem license has a ton of out of the box. Looks like there's over 80 security vendors that have integrations today. But I will mention that outbound API is completely customizable. So you can write your own templates. I think they're JSON templates to define whatever you want to automate based on an event that our IPAM system picks up.
So for the folks on the call today, what's really in it for them?
Well, what's in it for them is that two things. One, they don't have to disrupt their protocol services, right? We're not saying you have to disrupt DNS, DHCP. All this is an overlay. And we're just going to gather everything up and make it presentable at a single location, a location that you can still manage it from there. So you can still manage it from Microsoft, you can manage it from ours, and you're going to get a global comprehensive view of everything that's IPAM related. It's also had a ton of additional data added to it. That's really the primary benefit there.
All right, well, thanks for walking us through. Now, Dave, say somebody starts and takes a look at IPAM, but Infoblox has many different solutions, right? And so the idea here would be, what's the roadmap? Like if we were to start with IPAM, kind of where does it go from there? And what's important about authoritative IPAM?
So what we're talking about here is this is really the foundation of the Infoblox suite, right? And you may stop at this foundation or you can grow it over time, right? Because we can add services to it later. But what we're focusing on today is what's in this box, authoritative IPAM. And it can include one or both of these things, or you can even pick and choose which components you want. With IPAM QuickStart is a focus on, we're giving you IPAM, right? Or it comes with IPAM. It has the Microsoft management, which discovers all of the Microsoft DNS, DHCP. It comes with Network Insight, which does a network infrastructure discovery, and the reporting and analytics, right? If it's important to you, you can include in that authoritative IPAM the cloud network automation plugins and ecosystem features as well. which is the cloud discovering from Amazon Azure, the plugins to have the workflow integration with Ansible and VRA, ecosystem license that allows you to automate out to third-party tools. Now, over time, right, once you have that running, you may decide, and this is your choice, to then move to or slowly add Infoblox for your protocol services, right? It just, all you'd have to do is drop in another appliance into your grid, or actually turn it on with the existing grid if you want. And then you have DHCP DNS services. You can also overlay DTC, which is our DNS traffic controller, which is a combination of a global server load balancer and DNS server in one package, right? And even that you can take steps to going there, right? If you wanted to, you could use Infoblox DNS for recursive and recurse out to a Microsoft Authoritative DNS server. And then once you have DNS in place, you can then take advantage of security solutions as well. So ADP is advanced DNS protection, is ways where we can make sure that denial of services attacks don't occur. And active trust is DNS firewall, RPZ capabilities that actually have a feed, several different feeds, so that we know blacklisted sites that your user shouldn't go to. Threat Insight is doing the exfiltration, the detection, that sort of thing. So it's a layered approach. You can solve as you need it. You can stop at authoritative IPAM, however you want, but to start with the IPAM QuickStart is a great foundation to an existing environment without disrupting your protocol.
Exactly. Well, thanks for walking us through that roadmap. So Dave, why don't we do a little bit deeper dive now into what IPAM QuickStart is? We've been mentioning it as we go, but just in terms of being able to empower Microsoft and network admins.
Right. So what we're going to walk you through basically is a little bit, as a tidbit of each one of these features, right? You can do a whole presentation on each feature. So we're gonna cover what authoritative IPAM is, what Microsoft Management is, what Network Insight is, reporting analytics, CNA, which is our cloud network automation, and the security ecosystem. We'll walk through each one of those. Right. So I'll start with authoritative IPAM. So what this means is if you have an IP address management system that doesn't have a discovery engine attached to it, right? It's really not much better. It's really a glorified spreadsheet, right? It's giving you maybe easy UI tools to get next network based on a certain CIDR block, or get next available IP. Maybe it has API, that sort of thing. But what authoritative IPAM means is two things. One is it ensures that it's accurate. So because we're reaching out and touching the network, when you think a subnet is in use, we're validating it's in use. When you think an IP address is in use, we're validating that, right? If you think that IP address is fixed in a DHCP range, we're validating that sort of thing. So it's simply that it's accurate. The other thing that it means is we're adding additional metadata. It's not just a list of IPs and maybe usernames, host names, but we are tracking what it is. What is it? Is it a Cisco router? Is it an end host? What operating system, what model is it running on? What user is using it? When did it appear on the network? Where has it been on the network? Which subnet was it attached to? Which VLAN? That sort of thing. DHCP status, of course. We're keeping that information for up to 2 years. You can keep a record of where someone has moved around in the network. So it's the metadata, and it's the ensuring that it's accurate. And there's some nice policies and hooks we put in there so that when a new network is, or range, DHCP range is discovered, we're automatically bringing it into IPAM. If a new IP address or DNS record appears, we're automatically bringing it into IPAM, right? Also, as these things drop, they disappear from the network, we're either going to report on that, or we can release it from IPAM. And we're also validating that your end host to switch port configuration is accurate. And in the end, you have a great basically network database of truth, right? A lot of our customers will use that to feed their CMDBs, for instance, like a ServiceNow CMDB, because there's so much, we're sitting on so much valuable data. And incidentally, that ecosystem product I mentioned enables that integration with ServiceNow. Okay. The other thing I want to point out is all of what I just said, right, is I know I was kind of focusing a little bit on Microsoft and network infrastructure, but our goal at Infoblox is regardless of where your workflow, of where your network infrastructure is, and as you know, everybody's moving to virtual environments, moving to cloud, that sort of thing. It's our job to be able to detect it wherever it is. So regardless of whether it's wired, I'm going across the bottom, wired, wireless, whether it's a new software-defined networking or SD-WAN architecture, if you're using Microsoft or DHCP DNS Active Directory sites and services, if it's a virtual environment like OpenStack or VMware, if it's public cloud, Azure, Amazon, GCP, or hybrid, our goal is to discover all of those things and bring in metadata and bring it into the IPAM system. And that's your authoritative IPAM. And then, of course, if you choose in the future, you can lay down DDI network services from Infoblox, secure DNS. You can even, add more network automations. But that's the goal there, is to discover your infrastructure regardless of where it is. All right. Let me touch a little bit on what the Microsoft management is. So I'm going to just do a slide or two on each one of those features, and I'll do a quick demo also. So this is a DNS DHCP integration. It's one of the things that it does. And you can see here in the elementary drawing here that in our grid and we can do a whole other presentation on that. Our grid members are doing discovery. It's where the IPAM resides. There's a database. We have connections out to the Microsoft servers running DNS or DHCP Active Directory. And we're discovering all those things, giving you a central place to manage it. So it's not just a view, you can manage it. You can change DHCP, DNS properties, add records, that sort of thing from our UI, and it will take control of those Microsoft machines. Or if you continue to use the Microsoft management system, then we'll discover those as well. It is an agentless connection, which is nice. You have nothing to install in those Microsoft boxes. We use RPC DCOM to connect to them. You can define how often you want us to synchronize. We are discovering the Active Directory domain controllers, the sites, the subnets that are used for replication. The identity mapping is discovering all of the users. So now you'll see network users in our UI, and it's not just a matter of, hey, which IP address is on this particular network. You're seeing the actual user, and we keep track of that. Of course, all of these things, even though it's Microsoft DNS and DHCP instead of Infoblox, is still available in our reports, right? And then obviously, because our reports can have a lot of predictive analytics, you can do resource planning. So this slide is just drilling into that a little bit more. It is automatically synchronized, and as I mentioned, no agent required. It is bidirectional, meaning that we're not just gathering data. You can control it as well. And then within our reporting, as I mentioned a minute ago, not only is it the current state, but it's trending over time, right? DNS lookups over time, trends on which users, which sites are being hit, that sort of thing. And you can do predictive analysis, analytics on that. And of course, you can set alerting if something gets a little bit too high. So just a couple of slides drilling into the Microsoft management. Now I'm going to move to Network Insight. This is the discovery feature. So this is, when you think about it, this is your classic SNMP CLI discovery. This is a very deep discovery. You can choose which protocols you want to use. But I'll just talk about the questions that it would answer, the use cases. So from a network visibility standpoint, you're going to see the network devices and hosts that are on your network. We are going to model these. So we're going to pull it apart and show you which subnets, which VLANs, which IP addresses. We have to do that because we're feeding the IPAM system, split it out by subnet, IP, VLAN, that sort of thing. We're also tracking all of the interfaces on the network on every device. So we know the status, whether the admin is up, down, what the operational status is, whether it's a trunk or an access port, that sort of thing. We're keeping a historical list. I've got a nice report to show you for you later on that. We have the component inventory, just simply from an asset inventory. We have serial numbers. We have each module, the interface cards, fans, power supplies, and we're keeping track of when these appeared and where they are now and where they've been in the past. From a security standpoint, I mentioned this because security comes into play quite a bit in the discovery implementations, is now you can answer questions like, to which switch port or wireless access point is this end host attached to, right? This end host might be compromised. Maybe a vulnerability scanner picked up a compromised end host, maybe a DNS Firewall have found an RPZ hit that's compromised. Rogue might mean that it's not supposed to be there. Something that you didn't have tracked in IPAM, or maybe someone just hooked up a Netgear in their cube, that sort of thing. Pick up on that. We're tracking that, as I mentioned, for up to 2 years. So you can enter a MAC, an IP, a user's name, and we'll show you every place they've been on the network for the past 2 years, regardless of whether it was on the wired at one point or the wireless at some other time. And then you can quarantine. So you can use this product to quarantine, because we do have control of the switches. If you wanted to admin down or move something to a quarantine VLAN, or we can just fire off using ecosystem out to like a network access control capability like Cisco ICE to move it to a different trust sec, right? And then you're also finding out, you're discovering assets that you didn't know about, which is a little bit related to the rogue. The operational efficiencies, again, because, and it's kind of common theme here, because we're collapsing Discovery and IPAM and DNS DHCP into a single view, you have some nice workflows within the single UI you can run. I'll just give you a few examples. Like if we do detect an object on the network that isn't in IPAM, it's very simple to convert it to a managed object. Oh yeah, okay, I'm going to convert that to a fixed host record. I'm going to convert that to a DNS APTR record, that sort of thing. When you're defining a new host record, like you go and define, I'm going to use this IP address because someone requested an IP address for a physical host in the data center. You can, at that point in time, reserve and provision the switch port that it's attached to, if you want, all in the single UI. Or if you define a new network and you want to define the discovery settings, because you have total control over what your discovery settings are. I want to turn on SNMP for the subnet, but I'm not going to bother with NetBIOS, that sort of thing. All right. Reporting and analytics. This, as I mentioned earlier, was the Splunk engine. Plug and play, meaning it just comes, it runs in the grid as well. But we have a ton of out-of-the-box dashboards. As this slide mentions, over 100. I'd say at least 60 of them or 70 apply, even if you're not using Infoblox for DNS, DHCP, or security. But these dashboards can be customized. You can copy the reports, and then you're just using the regular Splunk language to change it. And it's pretty easy. And then our customer base uses our community site quite often to share their reports or get tips on what they should do to define reports that they're looking for. Using that Splunk language, you can configure alerts on any of the metrics we have, and you can do predictive analysis. So you can get an idea of, oh, this is the time I think I'm going to run out of IP address capacity, or looking at my kilo queries per second on my DNS system over time, or even how the CPU is running on our own appliance. Okay. Okay, so these are the reports that even if you are not using Infoblox for DNS, DHCP, security, right, you're just using our QuickStart IPAM overlay to a Microsoft environment that you have available to you. And these are classified, the ones in the upper left, Discovery is if you have Network Insight, IPAM you're going to have no matter what, the cloud reports or when you have CNA. But just that link to the Microsoft DNS servers and the Microsoft DHCP servers, you're going to get reports like you see here as well. And I'll try to show a couple of those to you later. All right. So the value of Discovery, once we have all this data, right, there's a lot of different things we can do to it. But one of the common use cases, and I mentioned this one because this is related to our ecosystem capability, which is an outbound API, is that there's a wide variety of events you may want to trigger off of. Like a new lease was given out, a new subnet was found, a new IP address was found that's not managed. You can fire out to anything that you want. And we do have a lot of out-of-the-box integrations for this. This one is showing Rapid7, but we have others with McAfee and Qualys and Tenable and that sort of thing. So the use case in this case might be, hey, we discovered a new subnet, pass it out to Rapid7, they can do an immediate subnet scan of it, right? But again, the sky's the limit on what you want to automate there. This one is similar to, this is using Discovery and ecosystem as well. It's to Cisco ICE. We have an out-of-the-box integration with Cisco's ICE PX Grid, which is their latest network access control. And there's three types of integration here. The one and number one is that we are subscribed to data from ICE. So we can get user information from ICE, we can get the quarantine data from ICE, and that is displayable right in the Infoblox UI. And number two, we're publishing data out to ICE. So this is the things that we're discovering. We're discovering and fingerprinting end hosts, whether it's a DHCP fingerprint or whether we just identified it with our discovery protocol. We can share that out to ICE, and that might determine or modify the TrustSec policies, right? If you have a TrustSec policy for a certain device type, we're discovering that device type, and we can send it out. And number three is that we have a wide variety of events that we can send out to ICE to potentially trigger a quarantine. So in this particular example, might not apply to authoritative IPAM, but in this case, we're saying we're throwing out a DNS firewall event, like an RPZ hit happened, identifying that a server might have malware, and we want to quarantine it. But that could be a wide variety of other events that trigger that as well. So this is highlighting this slide, the Ansible plugin, which comes with our cloud network automation feature. But this would apply to any orchestrator that we have an integration with, and we have integrations with quite a few. But the main point I want to make here is that when you know that your IPAM is accurate, right, that really enables automation, because now and you can use automation to reliably get an IP address that you know is not in use. Right? Without automation, or without, I should say, authoritative IPAM, you can't be assured that IP address is not in use, right? And if you add automation to grab one that's in use, you could cause duplicate IP addresses on the network, right? So this is highlighting the classic example. A lot of folks have this use case where there's an end-to-end workflow when you're provisioning a new VM, where you're going to allocate storage, you're going to build the VM, you're going to potentially make some changes to the network. When you deploy that VM, you're going to need to get the next available IP address. You're going to need to configure DNS based on the host name the user typed in the portal, and then off you go. And then when the VM is torn down, you give the IP address back, you unregister DNS, that sort of thing. So that whole thing is end-to-end automated with that workflow. Okay. All right, so let me show you a little bit of the product here. I'll make this quick. You could demo a lot of these different features, and it would take a while. So I'm just going to focus on a few things to kind of point out what authoritative IPAM means. Okay, so where I'm going to start is the IPAM system is primarily under data management IPAM. All right, and you can see here that what we're displaying here are containers, subnets, and IP addresses, right? And when you drill into a particular container or subnet, there's a couple different views that you can get. There can be a list view. Here, I'll just go to oh, I had it there. I'm sorry. Where I go? This one. It could be a list view like you see here, or it could be a map view, right? And we're just basically giving a graphic of the sections of that subnet or container that are available or not. Well, you can see here when I drill into this container, some of these networks are native to IPAM, and these two networks were discovered from Microsoft servers, right? So we're giving you a collapsed view of whether it's native to Infoblox or whether it came from Microsoft. And the way that's set up, just to give you a quick view of this, is if I come over to the grid and I go to my Microsoft servers, these are the two servers that we have connections with, right? Both of these are running both DNS and DHCP. They can be running Active Directory as well. You can choose that. When you go to add a new Microsoft system, you're providing, what features do you want us to configure or discover here? Is it users for identity mapping? Is it DNS, DHCP service? Is it Active Directory sites? And then you can configure the connection parameters there. And then also, just to give you a view of this, the Active Directory domains that we discovered are here as well. In addition to the sites, you can drill into the sites and you'll see the subnets configured for replication. These subnets then get pulled into IPAM as well, so you can keep track of those, right? So once that's configured, if I go over to the Infoblox DHCP, this is where you configure DHCP for if you were using Infoblox for DHCP, but in this case, we're seeing some Microsoft machines. Let me go back out to the main screen. Right, so these down here are Infoblox members that are serving DHCP. I'm drilling into the Microsoft system that's DHCP, and it basically found 3 networks in here, 3 DHCP ranges. And so if I was to go and take a look at one of these, you can see now the type. This is back in our IPAM system. We pulled these IP addresses in from Microsoft, and we're identifying them as, yes, that's a used address, right? So we would pick up a conflict if we were to discover it someplace else. It's in a DHCP range. DHCP, it's currently free, right? There's not a user using that right now. It's not leased out on it, right? It's currently free. So that's what it would look like to discover and bring it into IPAM. Likewise, if I go over to DNS, right, again, we're going to see the DNS. These are, again, Infoblox appliances down below that are serving DNS. Here are a couple Microsoft. We can drill into here, drill into company, right, down to a particular domain name. And then these are the resource records that are available here, right, that we discovered. So this one, for instance, here, this A record on 192, 168, 4.22. I have to come over here, back to IPAM, and go to 4.22. You can see here, identified as a PTR record, right? And we're just keeping that in the IPAM system. So keeping those things up to date. So that's a little bit about what the discovery looks like when we're pulling it in from DHCP and DNS. Let me talk a little bit about the discovery tool. In the discovery tool, let's see, here I am, discovery. In this case, I did mention it earlier, but our discovery can be configured in a distributed environment with multiple probes and a consolidator. In this database, we have a consolidator and 3 probes. And I just wanted to give you a quick view of the types of things you can discover. So these are many different ways you can configure discovery with timeouts and what services you want to enable, what TCP/IP ports we should be hitting on Nmap. You can provide a credentials that we should use for SNMP, CLI, blackout time periods where you don't want us to touch the network, rules for mapping VRF to certain network views, rules for mapping IP addresses to particular records. Right. And then once that is configured, then a couple things will happen. One is that you'll have a list of devices, of all the devices that we discovered on the network, right? This is a network device inventory. And you can see some of the data that we're getting, is it switcher router? What's its name? What's the OS that's running on it? If I was to drill into this particular switch right here, you're going to see that we modeled out all of the interfaces and their status, port speed, admin up, down, opera up, down, whether they're trunks or not, all of the subnets that we found on it, all of the IP addresses, the assets or the end hosts that are attached to it, the components, and like fans, power supplies, that sort of thing, right? So you've got full inventory right in the UI here. And then back out at IPAM, if I was to go here, just to show you what that looks like, I have one example. Yeah, right here. We're filling that right in the, so here's your IPAM again. We keep coming back to it. This is showing you that IP address is used by a router. It's attached to this device on that interface. That interface is up. This is the VLAN. This is when it was first discovered. All that data, again, appears right in the IPAM system. And if I was to drill into that, you would see even more data. So this is all the discovered data that we're getting from, this is what I mean by getting the additional context with our authoritative IPAM. So when you put that all together, there's a couple of things I want to point out. Put it all together, discovering from Microsoft DNS, Microsoft DHCP, and our discovery portal, you can see it right here within one subnet. This data was pulled in from discovery. This data here was pulled in from DNS. This data was pulled in from DHCP. This port is yellow. It's unmanaged because the administrators didn't think it was in use. And we discovered that it was in use. So this is what I mean by you could convert that to a managed object right from here. It's kind of a nice workflow automation. The other area where you can see this put to use nicely is here, is that this is a DNS record. We pulled that from Microsoft DNS. It's also combined with the fact that it's a Windows machine. It's attached to a Cisco Catalyst 37 switch on that interface, right? This is the VLAN it's on. That's when it was first discovered. So this is what we mean by having that view. A couple other quick things I'll point out under cloud. This is, you can see, this is where we're showing Azure, Amazon. Tenants, we give you VPCs, networks, VMs, right, that we're discovering. If I focus on VMs for a second, again, you can see the data here that we're pulling. This is right out of the Amazon cloud, some of those field types, right? And again, each one of these, everything comes back to IPAM. It all comes back to here where you've got one location that's tracking all these things. So this is the, these are the additional fields we're pulling in from Amazon to track that device. I'm sorry, that end host. I could go back to the subnet list to get that as well. And I'm running a little short on time. Let me show you real quick on reporting. So in the reporting, our home dashboard, you can see here, I'll just give you a quick glance. You'll have the slide with all the individual reports. But let's take a look at one or two real quick. I think I mentioned earlier that I was going to show you the device inventory or interface inventory. This one. All those dashboard reports come out of the box, and as you can see, a variety of those have been customized by our sales engineers. But here's what the nice, you can see the value of the data and how the Splunk reporting is really nice, in that you've got all these default filters up top. You get a nice summary pie chart, total interfaces on the network, how it's split up by port type, how it's split up by admin status. This looks like, you know, we're using probably 80% of our interfaces are up. Looks like 65% of them are actually being used. How many of them are trunks versus access ports? And then you have data for every interface historically on the network, right? It's the device, the interface, operational admin status, trunk status. And then you can filter on this. So a common use case here is, hey, I want to see all the ports that are admin up, but have opper down. And, you know, I haven't had an opper change in, you know, X period of time, right? These ports are candidates to be shut down because there isn't any traffic on them, but they are admin up, for instance. Okay. And I don't know, I probably got time for one more. Let's do DNS top requested domain names. Domain names. Yeah, this will give you an idea that you know, we're tracking every single DNS request that happens, right? So now, you know, this looks like it's, you can change it. Now this is showing you top 10, but the domain that gets requested the most, right? So, and some of the others that are coming up, and these are the queries that have occurred, right, over the last day. So you think about once you have this data, you can run some really interesting analytics on, hey, is there a particular machine that's getting hit over and over and over again, which could even indicate that you're under attack, right? That's even without a DNS security tool. Okay, and as I did mention, here I lied a second ago, I said that was gonna be the last one, but real quick, if I go back to the reports, I just wanted to show you that you do have the ability to customize all these. If I was to go to CPU test and see here that, right, so this is the Splunk language. So you come up here, you can save this, you can start tweaking these, adding alerts, adding threshold, doing predictive analysis, and then you can define your own reports, have those reports sent out to you on a regular basis. Okay, good. Back to the presentation. So we're down to the last couple slides. We wanted to touch real quickly on a couple of use cases, or case studies, I should say. This is a large U.S. federal government agency. I was familiar with this account. I was involved. They have a ton of different regions, right? You can see here 1,700 clinics, 153 hospitals. So it's almost 2,000 different areas. This was being managed by, actually it was divided into 5 regions with those, and they were using a different IPAM system. It was a third-party IPAM system in each one of those regions, right? It didn't have the power to collapse it all to a single UI in this case. And they were just using a lot of manual processes to keep that IPAM system up to date. They did have a little bit of discovery, but it wasn't working too well. They were finding lots of conflicts and errors, and just simply getting that view was very challenging. The final result was it's all in one spot, right? And as you can see in the below, their solution was IPAM. It was Microsoft Network Insight, CNA plugins, ecosystem reporting analytics, basically the whole suite. And now they have full visibility across all of these sites for our DHCP status, DNS status, all the infrastructure discovered. They got CNA because they have AWS, and the use of the plugins, or I should say the ecosystem, was mainly for an integration they wanted out to Forescout, which was their compliance testing tool. They wanted to be able to notify Forescout whenever a new subnet or IP address came out. Right. So again, they're not using Infoblox for DNS, DHCP at all yet. Right. It was all just the authoritative IPAM solution. And this was a similar type of scenario. This was a human resources enterprise planning provider. They were using spreadsheets in this case. It was a Microsoft environment, which was working fine, and they liked it. But they were managing them separately, and they basically got it all rolled into a single solution for visibility. They got Network Insight, Microsoft Management, the CNA for the cloud. I haven't bothered with the ecosystem license yet, but since they deployed this, after that, in several phases, about 3 months apart, for 12 months in total, they did add Infoblox DHCP. So again, you don't have to bite off DHCP and DNS at the same time. They're starting with DHCP, and then now, frankly, they're taking a look at whether they want to use Infoblox for DNS also, because obviously one of the advantages of going to DNS is you get all of our nice DNS security capabilities on top of it, which is something Microsoft doesn't support. So just a couple of use cases for you there. So Bob, I don't know, you just want to summarize here? I know we're at time. We may not need to go through these. What do you say?
Yeah, well, Dave, thanks so much. You've done a great job giving kind of an end-to-end view, and specifically around IPAM. I think just to summarize, with Microsoft Management, the IP address management overlay really extends the visibility that you need and the control. Network Insight extends to the discovery, and switch port management, provisioning, and reporting analytics gives you really full visibility, not only to look historically back in case you need to do audit or compliance checks, but it enables you to see what's going on currently in real time, what's going across the network, and then also get reports, send those out to interested parties and stakeholders, and then in addition to that, look forward to the predictive analytics to see how you can better manage resources as you look forward. So those are 3 of the components we've talked about. We also talked about cloud network automation, and so again, that's the discovery around the cloud-based endpoints and how to automate that, and then of course the ecosystem integrations with over 80 different security vendors, billions of indices literally, and those integrations, as Dave mentioned, with Cisco, McAfee, Qualys, and many others. So, why Infoblox? It's really a full end-to-end visibility, control, management solution for your network. And so, Dave, again, thanks so much for walking us through. So as we look forward, what are some next steps? you know, we've presented to you a lot of information today. One thing that you may want to do is contact Infoblox. Go onto our website because we have lots of Infoblox resources. We will be sending a couple of these out to you anyway. If you have questions, you see the number there. You can call. You can also send an email. One thing that you may want to do as well is do a DNS health check, and essentially you can enter information about your company, your email address, and then we have, you know, acceptance of some T's and C's. There's a domain, of course, that you can test, your company domain. The results are available, and then you can get a summary and a PDF of an analysis and evaluation of what's going on your network. So whether it's starting with IPAM, whether it's engaging with cloud, perhaps DHCP or DNS down the road, or perhaps even security at some point, we have the solutions for you and can help you get greater visibility and reliability across your network. Dave, what other thoughts do you have here as we wrap up?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, just keep in mind, the one thing I want to point out is that, again, this is an overlay. So we're not, you don't have to disrupt your current protocols. You may be completely happy with DNS DHCP from Microsoft. This is just simply a way for us to discover that environment and get your whole system into a single accurate IP address management system with all that extra metadata, your whole infrastructure in one place. But just that's the key thing I want to point out is that you can keep your existing protocol.
Yeah, well, Dave, thanks so much for your time today. This has really been great. And so for everyone on the call that joined with us, thank you. And we will be back next month to share some more information. In the meantime, thanks so much for joining us today. Dave, thanks again. And this concludes our presentation for today. Thank you.